Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Annalisa and I have been reading a lot of romance lately, but we're gonna get to that in a second. I'm tired again and I'm gonna blame the sun again because my garden needed attention today, and after I had been out there for a little bit working in the sun, I was completely tuckered. So I've just watched a video like yesterday by Stephanie Bethany, who is an autistic YouTuber who talks about autism almost exclusively. And she was doing a video on flat affect, which is a thing that a lot of autistic people have. We don't know why, but it is a thing where we don't show our emotions on our faces very well / at all unless we do it on purpose. It's harder to artificially paint on the emotions that we're actually feeling. So we feel the emotion, but then our face doesn't do the thing that other people's faces do when they feel those emotions. So in order to communicate our emotions, we have to artificially put those emotions on our faces because we've learned how to move our face in the correct way that it portrays the emotion that we're feeling. That takes a lot of energy to do. So I'm gonna try to go this entire video without masking my flat affect. And I don't know if that'll work very well because I am very nervous about not masking my flat affect because I didn't mask it for many years and no one liked me during those years. This meaning in public, like at school and church, not with my family. But we're gonna see if I can manage that, and then I'll get to watch this back and see what this looks like because I haven't recorded myself doing that. But on the book end of things, the reason that I started on a romance kick was because a book that I had been waiting for called The Duchess Deal came in from the library, the ebook version, and this had been recommended by Jean Bookish Thoughts, who has also been on a romance kick lately. She talked about it being a marriage of convenience trope, and I talked about it like several weeks ago that I was looking forward to it because I like that trope, and so I was happy for it to finally come in, but then it turned out that it was not handled in the way in which I like. So The Duchess Deal by Tessa is about a guy, a nobleman, who has come back from war and he got badly scarred because something like blew up right next to him. And so the one entire side of his body is scarred quite badly, like burns, you know, like Zuko's one side of his face, but it was just his whole face and like his whole half of his body. And so his fiance broke up with him because of that. And so now he needs a new wife because he hasn't got any close brothers or anything like that to take over his lands if he dies. If he dies, it'll all go to a distant cousin or uncle or something who he doesn't think would be a good steward of it, so he wants a son, so it'll go to him, which why you would think it's a random person who's descended from you would be so much better than your cousin, I don't know, except that it conforms to the idea that parents think they can make their children whatever they want and that they're little dolls they can mold however they like. In case you're not aware, that's a attitude that annoys me so much. But anyway, he wants an heir, so he decides to marry some random woman he finds. He was going to look for someone, but then the seamstress who was designing his previous fiance's wedding dress storms into his house and tells him off because she needs to get paid for this dress because his fiance just ordered it and then didn't pay, which why she couldn't sue her for that or somehow get the law involved and make her pay for it, I don't know. And so he's like, oh, you're in dire financial straits. I'll just use my money to convince you to marry me so that you don't have to starve, because that's consent. So basically I didn't like what I talked about in that other video again. If the arranged marriage trope is not used in a very specific way, it tends to be very rapey. And in this case it was, because he wanted to have sex with her so that she could have his kid, and so sex was a requirement of the convenient marriage and therefore not consensual. I also didn't like how spoofy it was. Like, it was making fun of a lot of tropes like even in the dialogue, not just in between the lines, but in the dialogue, that people were making fun of tropes in Regency romances, which didn't exist at the time. And so it wasn't like Northanger Abbey making fun of Gothic stories. It was kind of like half spoof, half not. And I don't mind books not taking themselves seriously, but this was just too much on the spoof side. And also the whole romance revolved around them falling in love via sex, which is the opposite of what I find romantic. Like, I understand demisexuals. Like, I can wrap my mind around it. People who want to have sex with someone because they're in love with them. I have zero understanding of people who are attracted to a person and then the great sex leads them to falling in love with the person. I don't get it. And that's fine for other people, but that's not how I like my romances, so I really didn't like that book in so many ways. Moving on, I had a hankering for this correctly done, my way done, arranged marriage trope, right? So I went for another book that I knew was an arranged marriage trope because it was by an author I've read romances by before, and that is Lisa Kleypas, specifically Devil in Winter, because I have read some other books from that quartet and it talked about how this other marriage was one of those. And in this one too, there was an expectation of sex, not for any real reason, just because that's what made the marriage legal. As if anyone would know, but it is between a nobleman who needs money and a rich girl who's gotten whose family has gotten their money through trade, and she wants to marry somebody because otherwise her evil family members who have custody of her are going to marry her off to themselves, to her cousin, because she's in the custody of like her aunts and uncles, to keep her money with them and in their control. So she runs off to this other guy. She knows that he needs money because he tried to get one of her friends who was rich to marry him, and so they make off for Gretna Green. And I did think that the carriage ride there was nice in how they treated each other, but then after they get married, trigger warning because I'm about to talk about rape basically, not graphically or anything, but discussion of what people sometimes think of as gray areas but are not gray areas, relating to whether consent is present or not. So basically the love interest just starts having sex with the heroine while she's asleep, and not like he wakes her up with a kiss, but like it was going on for a significant period of time, which you can tell because she has a sex dream relating to it while he's doing this in the morning, which is not how consent works. And then later on she has sex with him while he's telling her no, because she can tell that the reason he doesn't want to have sex with her right then is for a stupid reason, which is to win a bet with her that he can go 2 months without sex. But you don't get to decide if another person's reason for not wanting to have sex with you is stupid or not. And as I said, I've read quite a few books by this author, but she's never done this badly before. Like, she's come to some things that were like iffy, but nothing as bad as this before in what I've read. So that was frustrating. When I was pretending that those things didn't happen, basically, I could kind of ship the romance because of other things that were going on, and I really liked some of the platonic relationships that were in this book, but overall it was just really disappointing. So then finally I happened upon a video by Ella from Ella's Novellas, and she just did a whole video about recommending fantasy romances. And fantasy romances are something I have avoided in the past because they just seem like something that would be so much up my alley that I would be really disappointed if they turned out to not be good. And also, if I went on a fantasy romance kick, I might never come out of it, which is basically what's happening right now, and what did happen, because I read Radiance, which I believe was first recommended to me. I first heard of it from Jean Bookish Thoughts, but I had been avoiding it because I didn't want to get sunk into a fantasy romance hole. But then when Ella reminded me of it, I decided that since it was a arranged marriage trope that I would try it, and maybe finally I would find a book that did it the way that I wanted it to, and I would get my satisfaction after having 2 books that were disappointed in that area. And I was right, and I am happy that Ella brought it up because it was glorious. This is Radiance by Grace Draven, and now Grace Draven is like a big favorite author for me. And I've now read 4 of her books. So this first book, Radiance, is like my perfect idea of a arranged marriage trope. So this is a book where, as you can see from the cover, we have 2 different species going on here. One is called Kai and one is human. And so they are prince and princess of some 2 different kingdoms. One is in the line of succession, the prince, and the girl, the princess, is not, but he's fairly low on the line of succession, and so he is unimportant enough to marry off for a semi-unimportant alliance with another kingdom, and so is she. So their families stick them together to seal a trade alliance, and neither of them are particularly thrilled about this. Kai find humans ugly, and humans find Kai ugly because the Kai have different eyes and different teeth, and they have claws, and they don't like the way humans' eyes are. And so neither of them are like thrilled about it, and they haven't met before, but both of them are also like, this other person is in the same situation as I am. How about I be as nice to them as possible, and then we can all get through this without anybody having to be too upset. And so they meet each other briefly before their marriage, just walking out in the garden, and are really honest with each other about how each of them feels about how the other looks, without knowing who they are. Just being nice to a visiting Kai who is here with the retinue, and him just being nice to some random human who's in the garden. Then he figures out that this person he met in the garden was his wife-to-be, so he goes to see her just before the ceremony, and they have another open and honest conversation, and he's like, do you actually want to have sex after we get married? Because that's what you're supposed to do. And she's like, not really. And he's like, good, me neither. So she's just really nice to him about getting out of town as quickly as possible, because none of him or any of his retinue really wants to be there anymore because they really hate human food. And as they make the journey back to his kingdom, they're just really nice to each other, and he tries to take care of her as best he can and helps her when she's tired, because the Kai are mainly nocturnal and she has to adjust her sleeping schedule, and they're just really sweet and kind to each other and trying to make the best of things and figure out that they have really compatible personalities that have similar senses of humor. And through time spent just being around each other and wanting to take care of each other and make the situation as bearable and pleasant as possible for each other, they eventually fall in love. And I just think that's really sweet and wonderful. I also really enjoyed some of the side characters. There is a human named Saravek who lives just across the country border from the hero of the story, and they are trade allies. And there's also the hero's cousin named Unhuset, who is a really badass lady warrior, and so I really enjoyed them a lot, and the romance was just so sweet. There wasn't a whole lot of plot outside of the romance, but that's generally how it is with romances. There was some action and politics going on because various people were unhappy about the alliance, and there's naturally some responsibility that goes into being a landowner and protector as the hero is. So after I finished that one, I have been rereading various parts of Radiance because, as I said in my last video, I think it is mainly made up of relational fluff and a lot of them bonding and a lot of platonic cuddling and just them being really sweet to each other, and not just because they're attracted to each other, because they're not at first and for like half of the book. And so I have really been enjoying that. I'm really glad that I read it. And the next book that I read was the next book in the trilogy. You don't have to keep reading because they come to satisfying endings, but it was nice to get more of those characters and get more of Saravek and Unhuset. And there was a lot more fantasy stuff and a lot more other plot going on in this book because they're already together, so their relationship doesn't make up a whole plot, but there are some issues that come up in this one and that they need to address together. And I think how they work through those issues when they're relationship was so new. They're about a year on at this point. I think it made sense how they handled them and how their feelings were a bit raw and easy to hurt because they weren't totally sure if this was going to be a lasting thing, but they worked through their issues together, and I really liked that. And the fantasy aspects that came in were really interesting, and I would like to read the third book, but the library doesn't have it yet, so we'll see if I can get them to buy it. Although I am going to buy a print copy of Radiance, so I might end up buying a print copy of the third book as well. Next, I read Phoenix Unbound by the same author because I thought I was still in a romance mood, so I thought I would have good luck if I kept with the same author. And in this one, I didn't enjoy the romance as much, but I did really enjoy the world building and the setting and the side characters, because in this one, a lot of it takes place in a society that is very much like ancient Mongolian society, and actually some current Mongolian society. There are still people, I believe, who live nomadically and are herders mainly. So in this case, the hero, whose name I can't remember, came from this society and was captured by slavers and sold to this empire where the heroine is from. And so he is a gladiator in this country, and she is someone who is sent to be a human sacrifice and be burnt up with a bunch of other women who are all tributes from various towns, so a little Hunger Gamesy, in that it's a way to keep the people down. And so they meet because the whole burning sacrifice thing takes place in the Colosseum, where he is a gladiator, and she has this power over fire that she uses to escape from being burnt alive, and she can also do like illusions. And so he finds out and threatens to tell people and uses that to get her to help him escape. And then people who can control fire are very venerated in his society, so he kidnaps her and takes her back to his homeland, which is made up of nomadic herding clans, I think are they called. And they live in tents and mainly herd goats and sheep, but they also like capture and milk wild ponies and hunt and things like that. And I really loved basically all the scenes that had to do with that society and them spending time there and her getting to know his family. And by the time their relationship turns romantic, she's not his captive anymore, so it's not weird. And I also really like her fire powers and the way that that works, and how women are given very high rank in this society because the only people who have this firepower are women. So I really enjoyed a lot of aspects of that. The romance, I didn't really ship that much. I just didn't really care. I didn't see why they liked each other so much. Like, it wasn't terrible, but it just didn't like give me the feels. And also, right off the bat, trigger warning for rape. In this case, it isn't romanticized. It is the Empress rapes the hero on page, briefly, but still on page, and this is referred back to throughout the book. So if that's a big problem for you, I wouldn't recommend this one. So it's a solid 3 to 4 stars for me. Then I tried another one by this author, and this one I believe Ella also brought up. It's called Entreat Me, and it is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and you might know I really like Beauty and the Beast retellings. So in this case, we actually have 2 Beauty and the Beast pairings. We have our heroine, and then we have her little sister, and her little sister falls in love with a younger Beast character who is able to leave the castle and go off romancing women. And so the young sister runs off with him. Cinia is her name. Still can't remember the older sister's name, even though I just reread part of it today, and this one's another reread because I really liked it. So when Cinia runs off with the young Beast character, her older sister chases after her and comes to find out that at the castle where the young Beast lives, there is also an older Beast character, which she doesn't know about the Beast part yet, but I do, so I'm gonna say it. And so we find out gradually through the story there are flashbacks to these Beast characters' origins, so we get to find out what's going on through those. And so we find this out before the main character finds out, but not right away at the beginning. But basically the young Beast is the older Beast's son, kind of. He's his adopted son. and the son has been able to age while the father has not. So while they have that relationship, their ages are closer than a regular father and son would be, and so it's a little less weird that they are falling in love with an older and younger sister who have an age gap of 8 or 9 years, I think. And there are also some side characters in this one who work at the Beast Castle, and I really enjoyed them, who are a housekeeper slash cook slash lady of the house type person, and the Beast Sorcerer, who is not powerful enough to undo the curse that causes everything, but has been able to manipulate it and make it not as bad. And I really like those two characters. Our main character gets along really badly with the sorcerer, and they needle each other a lot, and it's really fun. I really like the pairing of the two romances, and I really like how we get to see how the platonic relationships between the sisters and between the father and son, and between the people who work in the castle with the people they work for. And in fact, platonic love is a really important part of breaking the curse in this case, and I really appreciated that. And actually the whole book starts off with my favorite Bible verse ever, which is why it's called Entreat Me. It is from the King James version of the verse, which begins with "Entreat me not to leave thee," and the rest in the version that I've memorized is "Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried." The reason that's my favorite is because it is all about a platonic relationship between two women, and so I assumed from the get-go that this was going to have strong platonic relationships, and it delivered on that. So that was very special to me, and I really enjoyed that. And so this one was again by Draven, so I think I'm going to keep reading things by her because she has written quite a few fantasy romances. Then I read Heart of the Fae by Emma Hamm, and this was one that Jean Bookish Thoughts had brought up before when talking about fantasy romances, and that I had been interested in but my library didn't have, so I ended up buying it for like $4, the ebook. This one I didn't enjoy as much as I thought I would. It's another Beauty and the Beast retelling, and it is about Irish Fae. Once again, a lot of Beauty and the Beast retellings that I like have some Irish influence. In this case, the Beauty character goes off to this magical island where the Beast character lives, which is basically an exile island for Fae who have been out of favor. She goes there to try to convince the Beast character to come and be a prisoner, basically, I think, for these other two nasty Fae, so that she can trade him for the cure to an illness that her father is suffering from. It's really complicated and weird, but once she's on the island, he's a grumpy doo-doo head, and along those lines, he's a lot like the Beast from the Disney renditions, where he's a big jerk, but his servants are all like, "Oh, a precious little human, let's take care of her." And I really liked the various side characters and the way that our main character interacted with them. She's very much a caring for type. She wants to fix everybody's problems and help everybody out. Hence her heading off to this island to find this cure, instead of, throwing up her hand. I've had an allergy attack between filming some segments of this, so if my eyes are watering, that's why. So I really enjoyed the side characters and the world building, and the romance was pretty good. I like the transition from Mr. Grumpy Pants to shedding his layers so we could see his mushy insides. And I liked that the main character was a midwife and was interested in becoming a doctor. So there were a lot of aspects that I liked, but this is the first of a duology, and it's not the type of duology where it's a whole story and then a sequel. It's like the same story split into two parts, and so you don't get a satisfying ending until you read the second book, and I didn't want to buy a whole nother book just to get one story. So I think I'm just going to leave it at half a story. It just wasn't enough up my alley to feel like it was worth going for the second half. If both of them were available from my library, that'd be a different thing. But also this first half of the story took like 400 pages, and I felt that that was kind of too long for the amount of story that it got across. So it was just kind of already going on too long, so I don't really feel like continuing it. Then I was thinking to myself, I've been reading a lot of books by white people, this month, or at least this last half of the month, and so I decided to see if I could find some romances written by people of color. And I've read a romance by Alyssa Cole before, but I didn't like it, so I decided to try out some different authors, and specifically to go for historical romance or fantasy, because I have had better luck with that than with contemporary, which was the one that I read by Alyssa Cole was contemporary. So using Goodreads lists, I found Vanessa Riley, who is a kind of medium-sized romance author, and she writes historical romance centering black main characters, especially black heroines, a fair number of white heroes, and I read The Bashful Bride by her, which is another marriage of convenience one, and this one was handled relatively well, two people being as nice to each other as they can, and not expecting sex out of the deal, just trying to take care of each other legally and as a friend, because they both need that. This takes place in the 1800s, between the time that slavery was abolished in England and the US Civil War, and our hero is an abolitionist. So there was a time when slavery was illegal in England, but not in its colonies or other holdings, so you could like live in England and own slaves as long as they were offshore, and so that's why the abolitionists were still fighting even though it was illegal on England's shores. A little quartet that this is like the second book in is about several black women whose families have risen to a lot of money by trade. So this one is about a fabric heiress, and so it's talked about during the book how that was possible for black people in England at the time, but very difficult and very dangerous, because white people would get upset that they were like rising above the station that they had been confined to for so long. Also, if there's a water stain or wrinkling on my shirt, it's because I went off and had dinner in between segments of this and I spilled water down my front, because that's just a thing I do all the time. Anyway, so there's a lot of talking about what life was like for black people in this era and in this time, and it seemed quite well researched to me from how everything fit together well and what I know of the time. And the reason that this abolitionist and this heiress are getting married is because the father of the heiress has set up a marriage of convenience for her with somebody else who she really doesn't like, because he is known to go around carousing a lot, and specifically she calls him a womanizer like 5 times within 10 pages, and it drives me nuts that she couldn't come up with a different word for that, or just refer to him afterwards as his name and not just call him the womanizer, the womanizer, the womanizer. But anyway, she didn't want to marry this guy, but her father was going to force her to, and she told him no again and again and again, but her father was like, no, you're going to do this. And the reason I emphasize that is because later on in the book it's portrayed as if she was wrong for running off and not telling her parents and eloping, as if trying to force your child to marry someone they don't want to is forgivable, let alone not a problem in the first place. She runs off with this abolitionist, and a lot of time is spent on their journey to Gretna Green, which takes 4 days. It takes 4 days for them. It took 2 days or 48 hours for the other couple from the earlier book I read that eloped to Gretna Green, because these guys are going a lot slower, and I don't know why they weren't going faster. A lot of time is spent on the road. In the prose, it's not skipped over much. We're just it gets really repetitive, them talking while they ride, and then talking while they ride, and then talking some more while they ride. And I think it's good that they had so much conversation before they got married, but it was also really boring that they like weren't conversing in different circumstances. They were just doing the same thing over and over, covering new ground conversationally, but you know, in most books where there's a lot of conversation, you have some conversation while you take a trip to the beach, and you have some while you play cards, and you have some while you do archery, you know, not just over and over we're sitting in the cab writing and talking. It was a bit boring, but anyway. And overall I didn't like really the prose or a lot of the craft that went into it, other than the repetitiveness in that first part. There was also repetitiveness repetitiveness of the arguments between slash the disagreements between the hero and the heroine. They kept fighting over the same thing, which was she wants him to stop being an abolitionist because it's dangerous, and she knows before she marries him that he's an abolitionist, right? And they spend 4 days getting there and a whole lot of time getting back, and when they get home she's like, yeah, you're not gonna go to rallies anymore, right? Well, it's kind of that classic attitude of you get a guy or a girl and you like some things about them but not other things, so you think you can just change them, and I don't know why you would think that you could do that. Also, this made me think of the fact that I really resent a lot of older authors who represent 21-year-olds as if they're complete idiots. I'm a 22-year-old and it offends me slightly. Like, I get representing 16-year-olds as if they're idiots, even though I don't think I was as much of an idiot as some people when I was 16. But come on. 21-year-olds can connect A to B and form some logical thoughts. And in this specific case, this is a fairly sheltered girl, but she's only been sheltered for the last like 5 years, because when she was 15, that was when they moved up to a richer house. Before that, she was exposed to all the nastiness of people being mean to her father because he was black and he was rising up and making money, and she used to be poor until she was 15, and still she's a complete ditz. And part of it was also that something that is addressed within the book, which is her family keeping secrets from her and shielding her from all life's hard things. Obviously they didn't shield her from the whole death thing that was threatening her father, because that's brought up a lot, but they shielded her from the fact that he had an affair once, and that her parents made up over it. They never told her they made up, and so they just, even though they knew she was upset about it, and they never told her that her sister didn't elope with someone, she actually just got pregnant and had an illegitimate child, and they sent her away to the country because they were ashamed. And there's just been a lot of secret keeping in this family, but still, based on the things that she is shown to know, it doesn't make sense that she can't be bothered to think through her decisions before she acts, and just can't form a logical conclusion from 2 pieces of information. Other than those, I also read some more of the Mercy Thompson series, and I really enjoyed those. Now that the main character's relationship has progressed to a certain point, there's a lot more of those aspects in it, so I really enjoyed the romance that is in these books at this stage. It's really sweet, and they depend on each other, but they're not codependent. They are just really nice, and I really like Mercy's relationship with Jessie, who is her love interest's daughter. I really like that protective friend relationship. It's really sweet. And also, as the series has gone on, I've now read Night Broken, Fire Touched, and Silence Fallen. So those are like number 8, 9, and 10. And we just keep adding in more characters that we're kind of adopting into our little family, and it's really sweet. I really like found families like that. It's very precious. And I've talked before about how there are 3 main groups of types of creatures that our main character interacts with, being the vampires, the werewolves, and the fae. There's also a 3rd group that causes trouble for her, which are these kind of primordial creatures, and like the spirit of a volcano and the spirit of a river. And so when these guys come up, we actually get to meet Coyote, who is associated with her because she can turn into a coyote, and so we get to delve into Native American lore and that side of things when the creatures are too big and bad for regular werewolf, vampire, or fae magic to deal with, and that's really fun. That's now happened 3 times. Also, in this latest book, Silence Fallen, we get to travel to Prague and meet a magical creature from there. I guess because Patricia Briggs read a legend about a golem that was made, and was like, that would be a cool thing to write a story about. And so she just has Mercy end up in Prague for reasons, and we get to go solve all the problems of Prague, all the supernatural problems at least. And in that one, the main characters, and in that one Mercy is separated from the rest of the group a lot, so she and the other members of the group have to make allies with other people and work with them, and that was really interesting, seeing some enemies working together. I'm continuing to enjoy that, and that also hits my spot of that romances do, where it's nice and relaxing and I get to just enjoy a bunch of characters without having to stress too much about making sense of a weird plot. even though the Mercy Thompson books have really interesting plots and have a lot of twists and turns, they're just not as dense as some other books. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!